Tonight, the families of the two Australians on death row in Indonesia see the men for the first time since they were moved to the execution island. Also ahead, the government to roll out a new campaign aimed at stopping young people becoming radicalised. Not for sale, the Treasurer takes Fairfax to court for defamation. And an ambitious attempt to fly a plane around the world without using a drop of fuel finally gets off the ground in Abu Dhabi. You're watching ABC News. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. The relatives of two Australian drug smugglers have paid their first visit to the men since they were moved from Bali to the prison island of Nusa Kambangan. Miran Sukumaran and Andrew Chan have now spent 6 days on the island awaiting execution. And in the past few hours, an Indonesian court has thrown out the appeal of another foreigner facing the firing squad. More on that in a moment. First, Indonesia correspondent George Roberts reports from Cilacap.
Arriving at the gateway to Nusa Kambangan, the men's families prepare for a much-anticipated reunion. Their brothers wearing traditional Indonesian batik, reserved for special occasions.
My mum, sister and I have been just waiting, counting down the days.
Mum's fairly excited to go and see Andy today.
Now they're allowed to cross the stretch of water between Cilacap and the island prison where their sons and siblings are being held. So far, they've been relying on others to say how the men were coping, held in relative isolation.
We've been told he's doing well, so we just want to see it for ourselves and, just to make sure and see him and to let him know that we love him.
The short trip across the strait, a chance to have some much-missed contact.
We're just looking forward to seeing when we get over there to give him a hug.
For now, they're allowed on the island twice a week, for about 4 hours at a time.
It's been an anxious wait just to be granted this visit, but it's also a journey they'd hoped never to take. The ominous reputation of Nusa Kambangan is, for people in Chan's and Sukumaran's position, it's an island they're not meant to leave alive.
But as every day of delay passes by, their lawyers have more time to defend them from facing the firing squad. They'll attempt another appeal in Jakarta this week. The families will get to visit again on Wednesday. George Roberts, ABC News, Cilacap, Central Java.
A court has thrown out the appeal of another foreigner on death row in Indonesia. A Nigerian man took his case to the State Administrative Court, claiming that the president had not properly considered his plea for clemency. But the court said it didn't have the authority to test the rights of the president, the same reason given to Andrew Chan and Miran Sukumaran's legal team 2 weeks ago. The lawyers for the two Australians will be back in the same court on Thursday to challenge the first decision. The Abbott government has foreshadowed an online campaign to counter the propaganda of militant groups like Islamic State. The Prime Minister says too many young people are being brainwashed, but he wouldn't be drawn on reports that one of the group's most recent recruits is a teenager from Melbourne's northern suburbs.
The boy, initially dubbed Britain's white jihadi by the UK media, is now believed to be a young man from Craigieburn in Melbourne's northern suburbs. Fairfax Media has identified him as an 18-year-old named Jake, who was known as a bright student at Craigieburn Secondary College. Former classmates have described him as quiet and reserved.
Didn't really talk much, and he's just a private guy and, had his own little group that he talked to, and that was about it.
The boy reportedly moved to another school before dropping out in the middle of last year. He's said to have worshipped at 2 mosques in the northern suburbs before heading to Iraq and possibly Syria late last year.
Absolutely shocked. You'd never think of that, and it was pretty bad.
Just last week, 2 teenage brothers were intercepted at Sydney Airport on suspicion they were trying to join Islamic State fighters in Syria.
This government is doing everything we humanly can to stop Australians from leaving, to go overseas to fight with the death cult. We're doing everything we can to apprehend Australians who are coming back.
But Muslim community leaders say not enough is being done to blunt the influence of Islamic State's slick propaganda.
We need to form a team, Australia team, where all the players will do their best to counter this radicalisation.
We are about to begin a very big campaign to try to counter the influence that the death cult has, particularly online, on vulnerable Australians. Too many Australians, it seems, are being brainwashed online by this death cult.
The government says the 2 teenagers stopped at Sydney Airport will be placed on a terrorist watch list. Frances Bell, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Federal Treasurer Joe Hockey has told a court how his elderly father broke down after reading a front-page article about him headlined "Treasurer for Sale." Mr Hockey is suing Fairfax Media for defamation over the piece, which was published last May. He says the story unjustly implied he was corrupt.
The politician and the paper, a headline act in a battle of reputation.
Look guys, the matter's before the court.
In court, Joe Hockey described reading the Fairfax article last May titled "Treasurer for Sale." "I was stunned," he said. "I was devastated, absolutely devastated." The article claimed a Liberal fundraising group called the North Sydney Forum was taking money from business people in return for access to the Federal Treasurer. Joe Hockey's lawyer said the article suggested his influence was being bought. The overwhelming reaction of people who read the article was that my client was being accused of corruption, and he tabled a tweet to prove it. After reading the article, the former Liberal PM Malcolm Fraser cast his judgment. Joe Hockey says his father cried when he rang him about the article. The only thing you walk out of politics with is your reputation.
Joe Hockey's lawyer told the court that the offending article was motivated by petty spite and revenge after Fairfax was forced to apologise for a previous story about the Treasurer. And he claims that Fairfax held the story for weeks and then published it just before the federal budget to maximise the damage.
An email written before the article by the Sydney Morning Herald's editor-in-chief was tabled in court. It read, "I've long dreamed of a headline that screams Sloppy Joe. I think we're not far off." Fairfax says it didn't intend to label Joe Hockey corrupt. In fact, the opening line to the opinion piece attached to the article in question says nobody is suggesting that Joe Hockey is corrupt. The Treasurer's team says the words that followed did exactly that. Ben Worsley, ABC News, Sydney.
Coalition backbenchers have signalled they're preparing for another policy battle with the Prime Minister, this time over proposed changes to the pension. The budget laid out plans to link pension increases to inflation rather than the average wage from 2017. Critics like Queensland MP Andrew Laming argue it would leave pensioners worse off and should be dumped, as the GP co-payment was after backbench pressure.
There's a couple of large missiles, Exocets and torpedoes aimed at this policy, and we're just hoping from the backbench that we will see some change.
We think it's a perfectly reasonable measure to put in place for a period of time until the budgetary position is substantially improved.
It's estimated the change would save the government $22.8 billion over the next decade. A man arrested over the rape of a young child in an Alice Springs town camp has made his first appearance in court. The victim's family says the youngster was sexually assaulted while trying to get home on Saturday afternoon.
The 29-year-old man has been charged over the rape of a child at the Hidden Valley town camp at the weekend. He's facing charges including sexual intercourse with a child under 10 years of age. He made a brief appearance in court today.
Because of the laws we have in the Northern Territory, we can't actually name the defendant at this stage. In fact, very little is known about what went on today, and it won't be made public because it was held in a closed hearing.
Family members of the victim are devastated at what's taken place. They've told the ABC the child was heading home after playing with siblings on Saturday afternoon. They say the young victim was abducted and dragged into shrubs in the centre of the town camp and raped. The crime has left many community residents angry and some have threatened reprisals. The child has been treated in the Alice Springs Hospital under the mother's supervision. The 29-year-old accused will remain behind bars until his next court appearance in May. Robert Herrick, ABC News, Alice Springs.
Relatives are comforting the husband of an Indian woman stabbed to death while walking through a Sydney park on her way home from work. Police have confirmed the woman was on the phone to her husband at the time. The murder has shaken Western Sydney's Indian community, but police say there's no indication the attack was racially motivated.
Prabha Arun Kumar was filmed walking through Parramatta Station on her way home from work, speaking to her husband on her mobile phone. Minutes later, she was fatally stabbed.
She sustained a number of injuries to the neck area with what we believe is a sharp-edged weapon.
The 41-year-old IT consultant was living in Westmead. In a few weeks, she was due to return home to Bangalore in southern India to visit her husband and young daughter. Police confirmed that Ms. Kumar was still on the phone to her husband when she was stabbed in Parramatta Park.
He's understandably extremely distressed, travelled out from India and arrived, I think, this morning.
Shocked family members in India tried to make sense of her murder.
I talked to some of my friends and indeed they said like Parramatta is kind of, racial history.
Members of Sydney's Indian community today called for calm.
I really urge Indians, particularly in India and here as well, that we should wait for full facts to come out.
Police say there's no evidence that Ms. Kumar knew her attacker.
We are considering all options at this point in time, including the fact that it may have been a random attack.
Westmead is home to a large Indian community. Locals remembered Ms. Kumar as a kind, quiet neighbour.
She would always give my mum flowers whenever she would ask for it.
It's not the first attack in Parramatta Park.
I was just thinking about this after this murder, that it's not so safe.
I never go in the night.
Ms. Kumar's husband formally identified his wife's body today. Alex McDonald, ABC News, Sydney.
A court in Moscow has charged two men in connection with the murder of Russian opposition activist Boris Nemtsov. One of the accused has reportedly admitted involvement in shooting Mr. Nemtsov on a bridge near the Kremlin. The court also ordered three other suspects to remain in jail until a decision is made on whether to file charges. A sixth man is reported to have killed himself in a standoff with police in the Chechen capital Grozny. Mr. Nemtsov was shot in the back 4 times a few hours after he went on radio denouncing President Vladimir Putin for what he called his mad aggressive policies in Ukraine. 70 years ago, in the dying stages of World War II, the US Air Force launched the single most deadly bombing raid in world history. The atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have dominated the retelling of World War II history, but the firebombing of Tokyo was more destructive. North Asia correspondent Matthew Carney has the story and a warning it contains some confronting images.
Here's where we pay off.
On March 9, 1945, 300 American B-29s dropped nearly 500,000 cylinders of napalm and petroleum jelly on the most densely populated areas of Tokyo. It brought mass incineration of civilians to a new horrific level. As a 10-year-old girl, Kiseko Motoki came to this bridge to escape the firestorm that turned 40 kilometres of Tokyo into an inferno. Her parents were burnt alive.
I saw melted black bodies everywhere. Burnt bodies were piled up on top of each other as high as a house. It was worse than hell.
In 2 days, more than 100,000 people died. 1 million were maimed and 1 million more were made homeless. It's a history largely ignored by both the United States and Japan, now close allies. But another survivor, Haruyu Nihei, says it's important the children of today remember.
It's likely Japan will be involved in a future war, so I want our children to understand. War destroys everything: families, buildings and culture.
And locked away in a memorial in central Tokyo is evidence of the horrors. Rarely filmed, these urns contain the ashes of more than 100,000, but most remain unidentified. What is known is that the vast majority are women, children and the elderly. The men were on the front lines. Matthew Carney, ABC News, Tokyo.
In the US, a baby girl has survived not just a crash, but also being stuck inside the car in a freezing cold river for 14 hours. Fishermen found the 18-month-old in the vehicle along with the body of her mother. The car had hit a cement barrier before landing in the river, but it was hidden from view by a bridge. Police aren't sure what caused the accident. A solar-powered plane has taken off from Abu Dhabi on the first attempt to fly around the world without using fossil fuel. The aircraft, called Solar Impulse 2, took off just after dawn on the first leg of a 5-month journey. 2 Swiss pilots will take turns flying the plane between stopovers. They'll land in India and China before the longest leg crossing the Pacific Ocean, which could take up to 5 days and nights. The plane has a wingspan equal to a large passenger jet and batteries to allow it to fly at night. An inquiry has found World Cycling's governing body bent its own drug testing rules and gave preferential treatment to disgraced cyclist Lance Armstrong to allow his comeback at the 2009 Tour Down Under. The report says Armstrong was paid a $1 million appearance fee for the race, in which he should not have been allowed to compete.
2 years after he admitted taking performance-enhancing drugs,
and I lied to you. And I'm sorry.
And was stripped of 7 Tour de France titles, the fallout from Lance Armstrong's lifetime cycling ban continues. An independent probe has found the International Cycling Union bent its own rules to facilitate his return to the sport. Armstrong needed to take part in a drug testing program for 6 months prior to his return to racing, a deadline missed by 13 days in the lead up to the 2009 Tour Down Under in Adelaide. The Cycling Independent Reform Commission found former UCI President Pat McQuaid told Armstrong he couldn't take part in the race, then had a sudden change of mind. In exchange, Armstrong agreed to ride for free in the Tour of Ireland, an event organised by Pat McQuaid's brother. The report states Tour Down Under organisers paid Armstrong a $1 million appearance fee, which went to the Cancer Survivors Live Strong Foundation. The Commission says he would have received a total of $3 million for his 3 Tour Down Under appearances. The state sports minister won't confirm that figure, but says it was money well spent.
I think it's just time that we moved on. What Lance Armstrong did for this state and for our Tour Down Under was take it to another level. And since he took it to that other level, we've sustained and increased those crowd numbers.
These sorts of publicly funded inducements need to be made transparent and accountable.
Despite the Armstrong scandal, the report says doping is still taking place, although attitudes have started to change.
The current riders in the elite area and the major teams, it's not the problem that it used to be. When you go at the lower levels, then that's where I think the concern continues.
The report warns riders are still reluctant to report doping or suspicious behaviour to authorities. James Hancock, ABC News, Adelaide.
It's been a shocking night for the Dragons, with their first round loss to Melbourne compounded by injury to star fullback Josh Dugan. The Storm took an early lead in the clash, and it took until after half-time for the Dragons to hit back through their Fijian debutant. But that's where the comeback ended. Melbourne held on for a 12-4 victory, while Dugan was forced from the field with an ankle injury. Earlier, Jesse Bromwich was reported for swinging an arm on Dugan. 9 NRL players have been charged by the Match Review Committee. It capped off a busy Monday for many clubs coming to terms with their respective starts to the season, while at Manly, players were also dealing with Daly Cherry-Evans' decision to join the Gold Coast Titans in 2016.
One door closes, another one opens. At least that's the way Daly Cherry-Evans' teammates are approaching his decision to leave at season's end.
Sad as a mate and as a club to see a great player and a great bloke leave the club next year. But we've seen that over the years here.
What the team isn't used to is losing 42-12, and the side's committed to turning that around against the Storm.
We need to be better. Our performances are not where we want them, and we've got to change it.
In contrast, the Rabbitohs got their season off to a flyer on Friday, and the man the Sea Eagles let go to try and keep Cherry Evans is loving every bit of it.
You know, no complaints. I'm very happy and grateful for the opportunity.
The Rabbitohs play the Roosters on Sunday, who are also coming off an impressive win.
We're all about trying to build our season, and you know, we got over the first hurdle on Saturday night, and now it's up to us to go out there and put a good performance in on Sunday.
The Broncos must regroup against the Sharks. Remarkably, the pressure on coach Wayne Bennett is mounting, but the skipper says it's the players who must lift.
Come this Friday night, we've got to make sure we come with a better attitude, and that's, you know, doing the little things that most players don't want to do.
And the NRL's match review committee has charged 9 players. Junior Paulo from the Eels is facing a ban of up to 9 weeks for this tackle on Matt Ballin. The Bulldogs could be without Josh Reynolds for 2, while Tigers 5'8" Mitchell Moses will escape a ban with an early guilty plea. Patrick Galloway, ABC News.
Australia's cricketers admit they need to lift their game ahead of the knockout stages of the World Cup. Australia secured a quarter-final spot after last night's 64-run win against Sri Lanka in Sydney, and selectors will have plenty to think about after a revived performance from inconsistent all-rounder Shane Watson.
The Australians might have been given some time off before Saturday's pool clash against a winless Scotland, but with the World Cup quarter-final around the corner, there's no room for complacency.
We know once it comes to finals, we've got to play our best cricket to I suppose, get where we want to get in the tournament, and so far we've still got one more pool game, and then we'll worry about that when it comes.
In his second match back from injury, Faulkner said he was pleased to take 3 wickets in Sydney.
It's good to get wickets, it's good to contribute, and it's more importantly, it's good to win.
The win held added satisfaction for 2 cricketers who have been under pressure for their performances this summer. Glenn Maxwell's 100 off 51 balls was the fastest ever by an Australian, and he shared a 160-run stand with Shane Watson, who earned a surprise recall after being dropped last week.
Obviously having Watto is he's been there for me over the last couple of weeks, or a tough couple of weeks, but he's been there for me through thick and thin.
The selectors' shock decision to reinstate Watson over Mitchell Marsh has been a talking point. But after a week in the headlines, Captain Michael Clarke wasn't about to be reeled into the debate.
I don't think so, Ben. I'm not going there. The selectors pick the 11 players, and my job's to try and get the best out of the 11 players, so no chance am I getting hold of that hook.
Australia will resume training on Wednesday. Daniela Intilli, ABC News.
In tonight's game, England has crashed out of the Cricket World Cup after being humbled by Bangladesh. Under pressure, England skipper Owen Morgan sent the Bangladeshis in at the Adelaide Oval, and it was a record-breaking innings for the world's 9th-ranked one-day nation.
And a single for Mamadullah takes him through to his first 100 in one-day internationals and Bangladesh's first in World Cup history.
Bangladesh finished on 275, but England's run chase crumbled, falling 15 runs short. In tennis, Australia has qualified for the quarter-finals of the Davis Cup for the first time in 9 years after defeating the Czech Republic in the first round of the tournament last night. Australia entered the final night of the tie, needing just 1 win from either of the 2 singles matches to progress, and Bernard Tomic sealed victory, winning his 2nd consecutive match in straight sets.
He's got it, and Australia are through. Standing ovation from the Australian fanatics.
Australia will host Kazakhstan in the quarter-final stage in July. About 80,000 people lined the streets of Melbourne this morning for the 61st annual Moomba Parade. The parade featured dance, music and culture from around the world and was the highlight of the 4-day Moomba Festival.
Troopers, turtles and traditional dress. The 61st Moomba Parade featured 2,000 performers from dozens of cultures, from overseas and even outer space. But the biggest cheer was reserved for someone much more familiar.
We all get behind it, us Melburnians. We like the silly stuff occasionally, it's good fun.
His Bollywood star Queen says it's a proud day for Melbourne's Indian community.
especially for my parents who are confused. They're like, are you the Queen of Mumbai or are you the Queen of Mumbai?
Everyone has their favourite act.
My particular favourite are the floats that are designed by the children of Melbourne. I'd watch out for Pizza Robot if I were you.
At the start, I didn't really know what to do, but then I thought I should put my two favourite things, pizza and robots, and that's how I created it.
A futuristic element to a tradition with a long history.
The first Moomba parade in 1955 was reportedly criticised by Melbourne's conservative establishment, who claimed it embodied social decay. 61 years later, thousands of onlookers say this festival symbolises the best that Melbourne has to offer.
It's a wonderful day for Melbourne, and really and truly we are fortunate to live in this city.
It was very fun and exciting to see.
It was colourful. You can see all the culture, different culture. You learn about the different culture, yeah.
A feast for the eyes and the ears. Margaret Paul, ABC News, Melbourne.
Let's take a look at the satellite. Troughs are causing thunderstorms over parts of New South Wales, Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. A monsoon trough is intensifying, causing showers and storms to increase over the North Queensland tropics. A front is bringing cool winds and the occasional shower to Victoria and Tasmania. Looking around the country now, showers and storms in far north Queensland, light showers about the coast, dry and hot in the state's far west. In New South Wales, hot in the north, showers and storms about the northern ranges, very warm in the south. To Victoria, warm in the north, light showers in the west, south and on the ranges. Cool with brisk winds and showers easing for Tasmania. Cool and cloudy in southern South Australia with a few light showers, mostly sunny and warm in the north ahead of a cooler change. Isolated showers and storms in northern Western Australia, hot in the north and warm in the west. Isolated showers and storms in the Northern Territory, sunny, dry and very warm in the south. Looking ahead to Wednesday's forecast for the capital cities, partly cloudy in Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra and Hobart, mostly sunny in Melbourne and Adelaide, clear skies in Perth and an afternoon storm on the way for Darwin. A bright light burning above Perth in the southwest this morning is believed to have been a small meteor. Witnesses say the intense white light flashed across the sky about 9:15. It was reported by dozens of people in the city and regional areas.
I saw this bright light, like a star, falling to the ground. It had a tail on it as well.
Scientists say the light was probably caused by a meteor. And that is ABC News for now. I'm Rachel Pupazzoni. Do stay with us. 7:30 is next.